You're with Fran Kelly, RN Breakfast.
Well, Kevin Rudd, as we've heard, will be sworn in as Prime Minister at 9:30 this morning, after which all of the action will shift to the floor of the House of Representatives. The Governor-General, seeking assurances from Prime Minister Rudd, has the confidence of the Parliament. Andrew Wilkie is one of the crossbenchers that Kevin Rudd will be relying on for support. He joins us in the Parliament House studios. Andrew Wilkie, welcome back to Breakfast.
Good morning, Fran.
Andrew Wilkie, you will be offering support and confidence to Kevin Rudd. Why?
Well, I did write to Kevin Rudd last night, fairly promptly, to say that if there is a motion of no confidence today, that I would not support that. Now, I haven't done that because I favour Kevin Rudd over Julia Gillard. Really, who is the Labor leader isn't my business. I've done that for two reasons, both in the public interest. First of all, I think a smooth transition to a new party leader is in the public interest. I also think that a snap election, which could be caused by a successful motion of no confidence, I don't think that would be good either, because if there is a snap election, that would only be for the House of Representatives. We'd be back here within 12 months for a half-Senate election, and that would cost the taxpayers an additional $150 million.
Well, Tony Abbott's argument is that snap election is exactly what voters want to end the mess that has been, in his terms, the Labor government, and to give people the chance now to get this lot out. Is there something to that position, in your view?
Well, the elections, it will be soon enough. Even if Kevin Rudd sticks with the 14 September date that Julia Gillard had announced some time ago, that's only 11 weeks away. So we really are talking around the margins now. You know, whether it be in 11 weeks, 9 weeks, 13 weeks, I think it's neither here nor there. The community will very shortly be able to pass judgment on the Gillard and now Rudd government and decide whether or not they would prefer an Abbott government. Tony
Windsor said yesterday he doesn't believe Labor would do any better under Kevin Rudd and an election whenever it is. What's your view?
Well, it remains to be seen. The polling suggests otherwise, but really, who knows? And in some ways, it's not my business. You know, I'm the member for Denison. I'm an independent member. I'm unaligned with any party. I will, like everyone else, watch with great interest what happens.
Well, in the short term, it's your business, I suppose, to the extent that this is a minority government. So there are many negotiations going on between the political leaders and the crossbenchers, people like yourself. You were clearly disappointed. You said you felt betrayed when Julia Gillard reneged on the deal you had with her over Pokey's reform. Do you expect Kevin Rudd to be a better Prime Minister in that sense? Because he's never really had a reputation for being inclusive. I remember in the first Parliament, Bob Brown saying he could never get a meeting with Kevin Rudd, could never get him to talk to him.
Look, I'm not going to take sides in any sort of continuing debate about Julia Gillard versus Kevin Rudd. As far as his relationship with the crossbench and the members of Parliament goes, we might only have one sitting day left. We might need to come back for any number of reasons, but the way things stand currently, we have a single sitting day left, and then we're back to our electorates, and many people will be in election mode.
Can you see any reason why you may need to come back for any more days?
Well, it'll be interesting to see what Kevin Rudd does on the policy front, and whether or not he wants the Parliament to reconvene to progress any policy changes that he might have in mind. There's much speculation about him bringing a different approach to the price on carbon, to asylum seekers and so on. I will say this quite clearly, though, that there are some things which must not be changed, no matter who is the Labor leader. I would not accept any substantial change to our price on carbon arrangements. Yes, let's talk about...
So you would not support an earlier shift to an ETS?
I'd be happy to talk about that, about the detail of a price on carbon, but the fact that we have a price on carbon is one of the great achievements of the Gillard government, and that must be preserved at all cost.
What about the Gonski school funding reforms? They've now passed into law. Kevin Rudd had been, some had thought was suggesting that he might like to see some change there. What's your commitment to that legislation as it changes and the school funding reform as it sits?
I have been a strong supporter of the Gonski reforms from the start, but like a lot of people, I'm disappointed about some of the aspects of the detail, so they could be improved. I mean, David Gonski recommended an additional $5 billion a year.
Well, there's unlikely to be more money.
Well, that's right, except what Julia Gillard ended up getting through the Parliament was less than half of the sort of funding that David Gonski had in mind. The same thing with disability care, or the old National Disability Insurance Scheme. Again, something I support, but again, not rolled out as we had hoped.
But the Coalition, though, would roll out no new money for education, I think is their latest position.
Yeah, but we're talking about the remaining time in this parliament and a Kevin Rudd prime ministership. I'm not advocating a vote for one party or the other. I'm an independent.
It's 8:11 on Breakfast, and we are speaking with the independent member for Denison, Andrew Wilkie. Andrew Wilkie, you were elected to Denison. You were a bit of a surprise packet, really, on the election night, and you were there and you got Green preferences, you got Liberal Party preferences, you got over the line. Will you hold Denison?
Who knows, Fran? The polling before the events of last night has been favourable, which has given me some cause for optimism. A Kevin Rudd return could change everything for me, and every day is a new day in politics, as you well know. I tell you what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to take the seat for granted, because that's why Labor lost the seat after 23 years.
Did Kevin Rudd lobby you? Has he been lobbying you about support?
I was approached by a senior Rudd backer yesterday afternoon, but that's pretty much the extent of it.
Julia Gillard, and I mentioned before, you have felt, you were betrayed by the Prime Minister because you had an agreement on pokie reform, which she walked back from and altered. But many people last night were praising Julia Gillard for some of her big reforms, but also for the way she managed the hung parliament. Do you give Julia Gillard credit for keeping the minority parliament together and functioning for virtually the entire term?
Yes, she did let me down terribly by backing out of her agreement with me on poker machine reform, and I remain very disappointed about that. And I think the fact that she didn't honour an agreement with a member of parliament is in the mix when we look at why her polling went down and why she eventually was removed. But I do give her credit for the good things she did achieve, and one of her biggest achievements, along with the now Deputy Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, was to turn a hung parliament into a working parliament.
And in your view, it was a working parliament?
Oh, look, there's no doubt. This parliament has been remarkably stable and productive and reformist. The problems, the controversies, the confrontations have been about the people who populate the parliament and the conduct of the government. The parliament itself, in my opinion, has been a very rich and successful parliament.
And as a policy reformer on the reform front?
And it's been remarkably reformist.
What about Julia Gillard's big reforms? Do you congratulate her on anything she's achieved on the reform front?
Absolutely. John Howard, when he controlled the Senate, couldn't put a price on carbon. Kevin Rudd, in his first term, couldn't put a price on carbon. Julia Gillard did in a power-sharing parliament. That is a remarkable political achievement. Disability care is a nation-changing reform. Maybe more funding for education through the Gonski reforms. That's nation-changing stuff. She deserves credit for the good things she did. It's a shame, though, that her term was punctuated by so many missteps and disappointments, including, being completely out of step with the community and refusing to drive meaningful poker machine reform.
Andrew Wilkie, thank you very much for joining us on Breakfast.
Thanks, Fran.
Andrew Wilkie is the independent member for Denison, a seat in Tasmania.
RN, your world unfolding.